Hey everybody, it's Bill Slocum at NC State University. In this part of my series of an introduction to the National Park Service ArcGIS Online for Organization series, I want to talk about creating a web app. And I want to show two different ways here, using configurable templates or the web app builder. But before we get to there, a little housekeeping. Neither the National Park Service nor NC State University endorses or recommends any commercial products, processes, or services. This material may not be used for advertising or product endorsement purposes. This material is intended for educational purposes only. Neither the U.S. government nor NC State University warrants or assumes any legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, completeness, or usefulness of any information, apparatus, product, or process disclosed. So, housekeeping's out of the way. Let's talk about what's a web app versus a web map. Well, you've seen me create web maps, and a web map is simply just that. It's a web map. And you do not have any control over how the interface is presented to the user. So as you've seen me create web maps, and maybe you've created some of your own at this point, I hope you have, then you'll notice that users would be able to add layers, delete layers, rename layers, create or disable informational pop-ups, change symbology. In other words, they would have free reign to do almost whatever they wanted to do to your map. Well, that can cause problems, especially if they start sharing that with other people. In the organization, you would have discrepancies between one map, or potential discrepancies between one map and another. A web app, on the other hand, is something that you create. And when you create these web apps, you need to think about the purpose. Why are you building this map? I've created a base map for all people to use. And that's just for looking and pointing and clicking and getting some information. That's the purpose. Just an overview of the park, a park base map. Then you want to look at functionality. Well, that click and bring up informational pop-ups and viewing attributes is functionality. So you have to decide if that's what you want to do. Do you also want to add other functionality? And we'll talk about that in demonstration. Finally, how does it look? Make sure that your application looks nice. People want to use applications where they look familiar to them and they are easy to use. A good design rule, and you'll be able to do this, is you should be able to do almost whatever you want with 3 button clicks. So that's kind of talking about the purpose, the functionality, and the aesthetics. So how do you get started? Well, the first thing you do is you start by creating a web map, and I've got one of those. I'll show you when I log in. Then you have a decision point to make based on that purpose, functionality, and aesthetics. The first thing you want to do is look at their configurable templates that Esri provides to you, and I'll show you how to do that. Those, you have the functionality there, and you just configure the template based on your needs. Another way is to customize, and you can do that with the web app builder, where you choose which tools go into your application. It's not a configurable template, but it is configurable because you get to choose what you put in your application. Finally, for the advanced users, you could download, alter the source code if you know JavaScript and some other languages like that, but then you would have to have a web server to host that source code on. That's kind of where you're going, but that's beyond the scope. Building is beyond the scope of this exercise. So let's get started. Let's have some fun. Well, first of all, you remember that URL that's up here, nps.maps.arcgis.com. That's where we're going to be going. So I've got my web browser here. I'm using Chrome. I kind of like that one. Esri develops on it quite a bit. And I'm going to sign in. Now, I'm going to sign in using my National Park Service account. I've got my PIV card put in, and this is the same way that you would log into other systems such as your Bison Connect or other National Park Service systems. So I've logged in there. I've added in my super secret passcode, and I'm going to go to my content. Now, your interface may look a little different than mine because I have elevated privileges, but it's all pretty much the same. So under my how-to videos, I have a web map, and I'm going to simply open that web map in a map viewer. Going over to the ellipses here. And I've got my web map. I've got all my layers. I've got trails. I've got kilometer markers, signs, culverts, and my park boundary. And that's just my web map. Now, if I were to share this with others, they could alter this, and I might not want them to do that. It's nice to have maps be consistent from person to person. I'm simply going to share and create a web app. Now, here you'll see that you have configurable templates, you have a web app builder, you have an operations dashboard. I'm going to let you explore that on your own. We don't have a lot of time to get into that. There is some help here. I highly recommend you use it. Oh, and look, you have a purpose, a functionality, and some aesthetics. So, you know, I read a lot of documentation. You should too. Let's go back to here. You'll notice that you can search. You can type in keywords like, I don't know, compare, and see what comes up. If I could spell today. Well, maybe not. But you see here you have a, there's how you spell compare, C-O-M-P-A-R-E. So here you have several different ways you could create apps that would compare different maps, okay? But let's not worry about that. You can explore that in your own time, which I know you've got plenty of. I'm just going to create the basic viewer here, and I'm going to say create a web app. Now, since I've already got a map with this name, I'm just going to call it basic viewer. And I'm going to give it a summary down here, although it does say it's optional. It's nice to be putting these things in here. And I'm going to say done. I'm going to be taken to another interface in just a moment where I can start to configure my basic viewer web app. Now you'll see it's loading up here. It might take time depending on where you are, and it loads the map. Now this is the map I wanted to make a web app out of, so it automatically selected that. I could select a different web map if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. And you can see here that you have tabs at the top. Well, let's just start at the general. I'm going to create a title, and I'm just going to call this Colonial National Historical Park. And for the subtitle, I'm going to say Basic, B-A-S, Basic Park Base. I'm just going to say Park Base Map. All right. And if I wanted to put some details in here, let's just put some details. It can be rich text. You can make it bold. You can color it, whatever you want to do. And I'm saying this is for Colonial National Historic Park personnel. Just going to leave it at that. And I am going to save. Save's down here on the lower left. Save early and often. So I'm going to save that. You should notice a few things happening up here. So now you can see I have Colonial National Historical Park, Park Base Map in my viewer. This up here where you can see configure, that's not part of the application. That's just part of the interface you're working with. Now let's go to theme. And again, you just walk through these tabs. I can change the header color, but let's stay with black, a little bit of the messaging thing going on here with the Park Service. I can leave the text as I want it. I can change button colors if that's what I want. These buttons, I can change them to different colors. We'll leave it at white, but it's all configurable, and that's what it means by configurable. Okay, if you wanted to have a title logo, maybe you've got something for the park you could put in here, and a link. You know, if you have a link on a web server, you could link to that, or if you know the location of the arrow, Park Service Arrowhead online, you could put that URL in there, and it usually works pretty well. Let's look at these options. I have a lot of options here. Now, these are already checked. And you can see them here with a base map gallery, map details. But I'm going to put in the legend. I'm going to use the measure tool, and I'm going to take the share tool away. And I am going to put the print tool, and you see a print all layout options. Let's just for kids, let's put that there. All right. And I'm going to hit save again. I want you to notice what happens up here. It's thinking about it. It's coming back. See, now I have extra widgets, and that's what we're going to call these, are widgets. If you click the base map, this allows users to control the base map they're looking at. And you can see here, there are canned base maps, and these are the images behind my vector data. And you can put in the park tiles imagery if that's what you chose to do. You can put in map box streets if that's what you chose to do. I'm going to just leave it where it is right now. Okay, I think this is just the default topographic here. Oh, no, it's the terrain with labels. I'm sorry, it's the terrain with labels. You'll see a fourth tab here. This allows me to tell people how they can search. Now, this can get a little tricky. If I wanted to say signs, I could edit that, and I could put in material or condition. Now, part of what the we got here is you can pick that, and let's say that the field is going to be what do we call this? We call it condition. Let's just see how this works. Again, you're just going to need to explore this functionality, and I'm going to save this. No one person gets it right the first time. I can guarantee you that. So it does take some trial and error and some exploration of the software. Now you'll notice here that I can use the Esri World Geolocator, which is going to find an address, and hopefully it's within your park, or signs. So I could search for the signs. But, you know, I don't really know what to look for. So maybe I take that out because that could confuse my user, and I'm just going to click Save. And it's going to save it. And then you can end up by just launching that application, and that's going to come up. And now you'll see that the only thing the user has access to is a legend, a layer list where they can turn things on and off if that's what they choose to do. They can change the base map. I've allowed them to measure, and if they want to measure in a distance, you can choose from different ways that you can measure that. If we want to say miles, we can start to use that tool if that's what we wanted to do. Okay, let me get rid of that and go back to my home extent. You have remember when I put in that detail, you could put in a little metadata about your application here if that's what you wanted to do. Maybe some instructions to help people use your map if that's what you think is wanted. Okay, so that's how to create a web app using a configurable template. Again, there's a lot of those configurable templates, and I really hope you explore the use of those. Let's go back to my base map here, and this is my web map. The second thing I want to show you is I want to create an app using the web app builder. And here I'm just going to say web app builder. And I'll show you while I'm doing this in just a moment. Well, we're going to put in the information here and say, hey, get started. Let's have a good time and explore the software and do great things. Make the world a better place. Now, again, this may look like a configurable template, but it's not. You have a lot more choices and a lot more functionality that you can add. You can also look at some previews. So, whoops, I'm sorry about that. So you can look at how your application may look on a lot of industry standard devices. Now these are devices that Esri has provided for you so you could see what your application would look like out in the field. I'm just going to go back to configure here. Alright, I'm going to stay with this foldable theme. It's nice. You can choose the different style if you want. The header's green, but let's just stay with, you know, the Park Service branding here. And let's go to map. Again, you're going to see that I could choose a different map that I had in my content, but this is what I really want to use. Okay, and I'm going to use this default extent. That'll be fine. You can customize those scales. You can investigate that all you would like. Let's look at widgets. This allows you to provide functionality. Remember, we had the ability for people to look at the layers. Well, look over here. Oh my, you have a legend widget, and you have a layer list widget, and you can turn layers on and off here if that's what you like. So that functionality is pretty much built in for you. But maybe what you want, or you want to put all the widgets over here. And you can see that here are my configurable widgets. Set the widgets in this controller here. This is in the header up here. So let's click on that and see you have your legend and your layer list. I'm going to take those out. And I'm going to go back to my widgets. And I'm going to start by putting some widgets up here, maybe an about widget. Okay, and let's get rid of this Esri stuff here and say hello NPS, just as an example here. Put that in. So you see now that I have a widget up here and I have an about window and it says hello NPS. Well, you know, I want some more widgets over here, so let's pick and choose. Well, I do need a legend. Every map needs a legend. I'm going to say OK. All right. I can alter this. If I've got an icon I want to choose that I have on my file system, I could upload that if that's what I wanted to do. Remember, this is a not a configurable widget, but a web app builder where you are customizing. Okay? I'm just going to leave it here and say OK. All right. You'll notice that I can take that away if I don't want it, and again, I can edit that. And the editing are things that Esri allows you to do. Maybe we want another edit, another one. Maybe we want a bookmark. A bookmark is always a good one. All right. And you can have it listed out as cards or a list. Let's just leave it at cards and say OK. And I'm going to save this. And it's saved, and it's saved. All right, and I do want to show you this. If my informational pop-ups that are associated with my web map are automatically transferred to my web app. How lovely is that? All right, well, I'm done with this app. All I want to do is, the purpose is to allow people to identify features on my map and to look at the legend so they understand what they're looking at. And I've also got some bookmarks, right? Well, I need to edit and configure those bookmarks, don't I? Well, how do you do that? Well, I'm going to create a bookmark. And let's just call this Jamestown Island. All right. I'm going to use this extent button here, and I'm going to zoom in to Jamestown Island. And if I had an image here of Jamestown Island, I could put it there. I'm going to click OK. Click OK. And I'm going to save my application here. And let's launch that thing. Let's see what it looks like. All right, there's my application. It's up. I have a title, which I could configure that if I wanted to. I have some information about the app, or I could put instructions or purpose of this application or credits. I've got a legend, and I've got something to allow people to zoom to Jamestown Island. Isn't that handy? If I want people to go back to the normal extent, they can always do that. So there you have it. That is how to create a web app. Let's just recap real quickly here. I don't want to run too late, but remember, you have to worry about the purpose, the functionality, and the aesthetics of your application. What's it for? What kind of functionality do those people need? And how's it going to look? It all starts with a web app. And do you need to use a configurable template? Do you need to customize using a web app builder, or potentially that dashboard tab that's your homework to explore? Or do you build it? Do you have that skill set to download that code and alter that code and host it on a web server? Those are your ways to create web apps and web maps, or to create web apps from your web maps. I hope you enjoy it. Jump into the software. Once again, please remember, it does take time. So if you don't get it right the first time, keep plugging along. You'll get there. Y'all have a good day, and thanks a lot.